Julie-Roxane, friend, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lou. Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
So just to paint for people listening, Julie-Roxane is a dear, dear friend, one of my best friends, and she is partners with Alistair, and Kellyanne Marjoram is my wife. So there's a lot of connections here. So they run a company called Wild Within, and I get to, sometimes support or always support, sometimes be involved, sometimes receive from them. So it's been a journey over the years. So I'm excited to maybe talk a little bit about that, but also get into what we want to talk about today. Julie-Roxane, I'll first say you started by telling me that, this moment of your life is the healthiest, most serene. You didn't use the word serene, but maybe just most connected or thriving. That's my word I used. That you felt like in a long time, happiest. And I'm just wanting to celebrate you and just maybe if speaking to, because we'll go into a bit more of your journey. Like what does that feel like? What does that mean to you right now?
Well, that's a great question. Means a lot. I do want to just reflect. I was also thinking about the fact that you're one of my best friends, and we don't say that to each other enough. So it's really sweet to have this opportunity. Yeah, I mean, what it means, it feels like a breath of relief. I think that I've been going through like the past like 7, 8 years have been quite transformative. And um, for those of you who don't know me or who've never heard my story, I used to live in Paris. I was a chef. I was working. I had a very, I don't know, like my life was on certain tracks. And that was 8 years ago that I left, and the leaving of that life, the everything that happened from like the awakening and realizing like how this cannot be my life. There's got to be more than this, and the amount of things that I had to do to kind of leave that life and build the next. I feel like 8 years later, I'm finally in the place where I've built the next. And it's a nice feeling because there's many, many dark nights during those 8 years where I'm like looking back and I can't see the shore that I left, but I cannot see the shore that I'm going to. And, like metaphorically speaking, it's really hard. And so it's a dream. I've been really feeling this summer, this just landing into this next phase of life, this new chapter, this new cycle, and it feels really good. And I'm sure there'll be many more dark nights of the souls, of the soul. I love those. But right now, it feels awesome to just feel. I feel kind of like the summer here in Oregon. It's been lovely and not too hot, not too cold. It's been perfect. That's how I've been feeling recently.
Can relate to that feeling of not being leaving from where you're at, not being where you're at, not yet, but maybe you have been in that cycle maybe more than most, it seems. This is also not a new place for you, as we find Julie Roxanne had a podcast that you ran consistently for 4 or 5 years,
I think it was like 4.5 years weekly for 4.5 years.
which
Yeah.
is incredible. It's an amazing show called the Far Out Podcast. So it's still available. Go check it out. There's some insane stories to listen to her and her husband, Alistair, recount. And maybe just, I'd love for people to just hear some of those highlights as far as like where you've moved around and why you've moved around. And I'll just kind of lay up a few because I think, one, you going on your journey, India, meeting Alistair, caravanning to Guatemala. Like there's just, they have such a unique story that I think is worth shining a little bit and then also giving
Yeah.
you more of a background into who Julie Roxanne is.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride geographically speaking, for sure. When I left my life in Paris, I had a backpack and I had my shoes, and that was my home, was my backpack and my shoes. And a complete miracle made me go to India, which is so funny because like, now I'm like, oh yeah, India. It's a great place to go if you're on a spiritual journey. when I made the decision to go, I just went to reconnect with a friend who was traveling through there, and I was like, who the hell goes to India? Like, that's a place people go to. Like, that's a place people care to go. Obviously, went there, fell totally in love, had to come back, and it was for good reasons because I ended up meeting, my soulmate and life partner, Alistair, who is from California. And so we actually realized later in our relationship, like not too long actually into our relationship, that we grew up on opposite sides of the globe. So if you go where he grew up and you dig a hole through the center of the earth and up out the other side, that's where I grew up, which is like really insane. And I think kind of poetic and like literally on the other side of the world. And then we traveled through Asia some, and when, we started to feel like, okay, it's time to hang up the traveling hat maybe and try to start finding our way back, which has been like very interesting journey. We landed in France, where I'm from, and we renovated a caravan and we lived in the woods in France for a couple of years. And then we moved to Guatemala for a year or so. And after that, we made the move to the US, which has been one of the craziest, hardest endeavor in my entire life. Was actually reflecting on that yesterday, that it's been 4 years since I've moved to the US. And that's also contributing to I'm finally feeling on the other side of this emigration process, which has been spiritually one of the craziest things I've ever done. And I feel like I have like 1,000 books to read about that, to write about that, not to read, to write. But it's still unfolding. So yeah, just the geographical, it's been all over.
Well, I think you left out maybe some, we left out a lot, of course, but the piece of why coming to the US following
Yeah.
a shamanic lineage and kind of going down a plant medicine path.
Yes, totally. That's been a big piece of the last 4 years, has been following like the impetus of following spiritual teachers that we found in Guatemala who were US born, and we just kind of learning and deep diving into the art of ceremony and being adopted by a shamanic lineage that traces roots all the way back to Peru. And that's another, I mean, that could be 3 podcasts. I mean, we literally we recorded like so much of the reason we had a podcast was to tell these stories because there were so many. And it's been a very humbling, deeply awakening journey. And like I'm hearing myself talk, and there's part of me that's like super cringy. It's like, oh my God, you did plant medicine and then you awakened. Okay, that's cool. But like also that's like it's actually it I feel like I was following such a like flutter from the heart and such a like drive. There was something that was like beckoning me to continue. And it's been such a journey of maturing into like the budding adulthood that I'm in, and like true adulthood, like the responsibility of it and the burden of it and the joys of it and the grief of it and all of that. It's been, yeah, it's just been 4 wonderful years. And it yeah, it feels good to be where I'm at right now.
Leaving to go to India, as you look back at that version, that age, that woman, maybe you see her as a girl, would you, because to tie in this leadership piece, like
Mm,
would you have called that person, that girl, a leader, right? And because I can imagine
mm,
it takes a lot of leadership, right, to say, hey, I'm not happy, or I'm not this, I'm going to make a change. And I guess, yeah, maybe just starting to explore how we view ourselves as a leader or not a leader. And yeah, maybe just starting there of like, if you look back at however young Julie
mhm.
Roxanne, was that version of you a leader?
Yeah. 24-year-old Julie-Roxane. I've been reflecting on this. I think that on a very maybe superficial understanding of the word leader. I think I've always been a leader. I have like I was always the one taking charge. I was always the one corralling groups. I was always the one, making things happen and coordinating people. And like, I'm a generator. So I was always the driving force behind stuff. I have like that motor and I just make shit happen. And it's also really interesting because I only make stuff happen that I really want to happen. Like if you try to recruit my motor to do something I don't really care about, it's not going to happen. So it's like that's another interesting thing. But I think, yeah, I mean, I remember the experience that prompted the decision that like really awakened me to I need to do something else. It was at the end of a really long shift that night, and I was in a lot of pain because I had like a really bad ingrown toenail, and doing a whole shift as a cook, like standing, serving, 150 people plus over the course of a dinner shift. I was in a lot of pain when I got home, and at that time I had started studying self-hypnosis and like hypnosis in general. And which, now I'm like, it's kind of just like a form of meditation. Like it's just an altered state of consciousness, and it's just a different doorway into it. But I kind of checked in with that part of my body. I was like, okay, it seems like you're trying to tell me something, ingrown toenail. What's going on? And the message just was like clear as day. Like, you can't keep doing this, right? Like, you've got bigger things to do in this lifetime. And it was both a confirmation of something I'd always felt, but it was also really daunting. I had no idea where to start and what that meant. And, there, I think what was nice about that moment of confirmation is that it also kind of cut through all of the imposter syndrome that I may have felt. It's like, I think a lot of parts of me already knew that I needed to do something else with my life. But there was this, well, who are you to want to do something better with your life? Like like just keep the status quo, like stop, like all these like protector parts would come up. And I think that moment was just so clear, there was no denying it. And after that, it was a really complex journey of like literally undoing everything I had started to build in my life, like relationships, places where I was living, and my work and all of that. And your question also prompts a memory of after making the decision and telling people like, okay, I'm done, I'm gonna go and travel and have no plans for a little bit. I remember, people had lots to say about that, but I remember someone being like, oh man, you're so lucky, I really wish I could do that. And I was like, it's not luck. Like I'm literally like putting everything that I've ever built on the line. And that's what I did. I burnt my life to the ground to start over. And it wasn't like the energy that required was really like, now that I think back on it. And it's also a very interesting time to have this conversation with you because I'm going back to Paris for the first time since I left. I'll be there in 3 weeks. And I'm going on a pilgrimage to like revisit this part of myself. So, short answer, I think, yeah, she was definitely already a leader. And I think what I have found recently is quite a lot of appreciation and gratitude for the fumbling of that. It's like she didn't know what she was doing. She just had this like deep conviction in her heart that something needed to be different and could be different. Like there was such a faith that it could look differently, and I just needed to throw myself into the deep end and hope to God that I learned how to swim. And I almost drowned a few times, but I learned how to swim. And so like in that way, that feels really like a leadership quality of being able to trust that just it's gonna work out. Like if you make a leap of faith that like something's gonna rise to meet you.
Well, what is it about? Because there's two pathways you could go, and when I hear your stories put like that, it's like it sounds a lot like my story, right? Obviously,
Mhm.
two different totally situations, but same essence in many ways of like making a big leaving something that's known for the complete unknown and having a
Mhm.
lot of judgment or uncertainty or misunderstandings about it. And I can imagine, and I don't know if you ever consider, maybe it's obviously hard to consider it, but what would happen if you didn't leave, right? And is just that act of leaving kind of the opening for you to step into this self-led path rather than the path that maybe was laid out for you, or not even that was laid out for you, just it's kind of like the whatever, I'm just going to do the thing, I'm
Mhm.
going to live. And um yeah, I guess I'm just curious of what your thoughts are on just that action, right? Because I think a lot of
Mhm.
people listening to this show probably have a similar time where they had to make a decision where other people might not have agreed or understood. And as I'm reflecting, speaking to you, to me, that sounds like a big act of leadership. And also where I'm going is like some people might not see themselves as a leader. So I'll pause there just to hear
Mhm.
any your thoughts on any of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it when you when you brought the question, like, what do you think, what would life have looked like if I didn't make that call? There is kind of like a dark shiver that goes down my spine. I don't think I don't think it would be going very well. I was already not doing very well. Like, I needed to make a change, and like not listening would have just prompted the not going well to get louder and louder. And so I don't know, but I don't think that story goes well if I had stayed. I think that's something else that I've reflected a lot about, which feels like so much of like the drive to leave. There was a survival energy to it. There was a pulling myself away from something that was not gonna end well if I kept going down. And it could have looked like a lot of different ways. Like, we don't have to imagine the worst, but I can just imagining like being a numbed out 33-year-old with a partner that I can't communicate with, and maybe we have two children and we're struggling to make ends meet, and like just like the I don't know. I can see a very different picture than what my life feels like right now. But going back to the leadership question, it's interesting. I'm reflecting on what leadership actually means and what it actually is. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around that word, and I think it's actually very loaded. We're launching it again, but we led our program Foundations of Wild Leadership earlier this year at Wild Within, and I was really surprised to feel how a lot of people who partook, who like a lot of the participants, we're having kind of like challenges with the concept of being a leader. It's like it's so loaded. It's so loaded. It's like, I think when like the loaded version is like we kind of picture like the CEO of a corporation, and it's like that's our version of a leader. And I think so much of my life has been to like reappropriate the concept of leadership, and to like bring it back into its rightful meaning. And I think sometimes this is why we add the word wild in front of it, just to like kind of differentiate, because it's like I feel like wild leadership, and at least the leadership that I'm feeling is true leadership, is a lot more interested in the unknown than it is in the known. And I think that the sort of like false image of leaders that we have, or at least what we maybe associate with leadership, is like somehow you have to know what you're doing. You have to have a bunch of people that don't question what you're doing and that follow you blindly. And you have to, like, I'm making it up. There's probably a lot of like people might disagree with that definition, but there's a sense of like it's rigid, it's like very directive, it's very um it's like power over. So it's like there's a leader and it has power over the people that it's leading. And I'm not interested in that version of leadership at all, and I think that that actually causes more harm than good over the long term. um so yeah, I'll pause there. I feel like I can definitely say a lot more, but I'm wondering.
No, I
Yeah.
think I think you hit the nail on the head with how people have a tough time seeing themselves with that word. I have a mastermind group that the original potential name for it before it became the name that it is maybe even 2 years ago when I was still thinking about this, was Wellness Leaders Mastermind. And
Mhm.
I remember telling that to someone who I thought would be a good fit. And her first reaction was like, "Oh, I didn't even think that would be for me." And I'm like, "What do
Mm,
you mean? You're doing, like, you're bringing mindfulness into your, you're stepping out and bringing mindfulness into your company, doing these things. Like, of course, like you're lead." And she's like,
mm,
"Oh, yeah, maybe I am a leader in that way." And so, yeah, for whatever reason, we see the corporate sterile, leadership training is such a buzzword. And you'll, if you want to be a keynote speaker, go talk on leadership as one of the biggest, opportunities to do it. And I will say, I don't think all, I think people are speaking, not just, and they're not, I don't, I think in the healthy ways, and even in corporate, they're speaking as, more of a servant leader, right?
mhm,
You're not like the power over, right? Power by example in some ways. And our buddy Seth, would
mm.
say about the leader is going into, right, the unknown. And with that, I know comes a lot of imposter syndrome, because how could we know what's going to happen? How could we have all the answers, which maybe people think they need to have if they're going to be a leader. So I never even realized, to me, it was just wild within. So that's why you called it wild leadership. But now comparing it to how we think of regular leadership, wild leadership makes even more sense
Yeah.
now. So I guess tell me more. Well, tell me, wild within, just to keep connecting the dots of your personal journey to kind of what you're excited about, like right now, and around this leadership piece. But how does wild within enter your picture, from chefing to meeting, Alistair, and yeah, maybe speaking, highlighting that a little bit, or how has that evolved for you?
Yeah, I love all the like down memory lane questions you're asking me. It's so fun. Yeah, Wild Within. I mean, I remember. I'm pretty sure you were on that first phone call, or you were at least in the background. I vividly remember where we were sitting. It was on the land that we had our caravan, and that was like in the woods in France. And your now wife, Kellyanne, called Alistair and said, "Hey, I just went to Yosemite and I feel like we could totally organize a retreat there. And I'm wondering if you want to partner up so that you can," because Alistair had a lot of backpacking experience at that point, and like hiking through wildernesses across the world, because he did that before we met. And we did that some together after we met. He somehow, I decided it was a great idea to go to Everest Base Camp with him after having done zero amount of training, and it worked out. I was young and it worked out, but like it's really funny to look back on like just the things we did early on. But anyways, yeah, Kellyanne called and said, "Let's make something happen." And that was 2018, and in 2019 we ran our first wilderness backpacking retreat. That was such a mission to organize, and we've been reflecting on this a lot, of how we completely did it backwards. It's like, most people will build out their businesses and they have that funnel, right? They have like the like entry level offering, and then and then you offer the big thing, that like the big offering flagship that costs the most money. And we just went straight for that. We were like, whatever, that's gonna work. And it did. Somehow we had people come and do that retreat with us. And then, I think everybody remembers 2020 and 2021 and how the world was back then. And so we kind of had to, there was no capacity to do these retreats during those 2 years. That prompted quite a bit of questioning around what we were doing. We had a different name back then, and then that's when we rebranded into Wild Within, and we started like feeling our way into like, what is this? Because Wild Within feels so much like a dream. It feels like something that has been birthed, and that has a consciousness of its own, and that is like informing what it wants us to do. Like we're kind of like servants to this bigger vision that is Wild Within, which is, kind of the simple version of what you shared in my intro, of this idea that the wild within and the wild without are kin. They're the same thing. And like if we can connect to one, we connect to the other. And it's just this like remembrance of the richness of life when we're able to connect to the more than human world, which is like a term that I can't remember who coined this, but it's like the idea of like the whole ecosystems that we live in. And so we've been just really asking the questions of like what is that? How do we serve that mission? How do we serve that vision? And it's been quite a ride for me personally, because I was part of Wild Within at first, and then I kind of stepped out of it, and then let Alistair and Kellyanne do mostly, the thing, and now I'm back in, and it's, again, this is like, it could be a whole different separate podcast, but there's been lots of interesting interpersonal like marriage dynamics of like running a business with your husband. And so that's been a lot of why I think I stepped out for a minute, and then now I'm back, and I feel like I'm back with the right intentions in the right way. And it feels so good to be in service to this vision again, which really ultimately is like it's like it feels like this big oak tree that like that's the vision. It's like, can we grow this vision, this company, this organization to be like a place that people can come find shelter at different stages of their life when they're ready to dip their toes into the work. And so we offer retreats, and we did a wonderful retreat in Guatemala that you attended that was like blew all of our minds and was so transformational, for all of us. And we offer educational programs online. We ran a couple of Wild Women and Wild Man Within programs that were so fun to like go for 8 weeks, go with a group of men and a group of women to like explore the archetype of the wild woman and the wild man. And I think every time we offer something, there's a feeling that not only the participants but us as well, we get something back. We retrieve a piece of the larger question of what it means to be human in a good way, and walking the beauty way, which sounds also a little cliche, but it's like, what else is there to do? Like, what higher is there, a higher purpose than learning to walk the earth with beauty? I don't think so.
So beautiful. No, no, that's probably not the right word to use, but yeah, it is the right word to use, but cliche or whatever. I'm losing the right word. But I think just highlighting how you've, as someone who's gotten a front row seat, they definitely did things backwards. And if you go to my podcast with Alistair on the wild truth of running retreats, you'd hear more of that story of starting with retreats, which is the hardest thing to get people to join. And the way that you started, which for many people is a lot to start with retreats, and to keep that going, it would be the business advice a lot of people don't tell people to start with retreats. Start with everything else. And yeah, just really, I mean, admire the slowness that you've allowed it to go and the way that you ask what it needs of you. And I think that's something we all could learn from. In Sometimes it's tough for you all because you have a company that's very separate because it's communal. So there is this entity of the company. And I think for, let's say, a solo entrepreneur, it is important to maybe LLC or to have it separate and to actually see it as its own entity. And I think just asking that question, like, what is this wanting from me? Like, I might want it to be doing X, Y, and Z now, or wanting to have this many clients or this much success, yada, yada, yada. But can I slow down and ask, what is it wanting? And it's not always an easy thing to do, and something that you all do really wonderfully. And I think as something, yeah, something that I think should be a takeaway for people just in asking that question, right? What
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
what is my business? What is my work wanting of me, rather than what am I wanting of it? And
Yeah.
often the the paradox is the thing that it's wanting is probably what's going to make us the most content and happy anyway.
Yeah, it's that's such an interesting rabbit hole to go down. Like so many things that you said, I think that's been such a learning curve of like learning to slow down, to actually pay attention. This is also, I think, one of the gifts of doing it with three business partners is like obviously we have to go slower, especially because like we're bi-coastal. And so it's we can't and also like I think I'll speak just for myself, but like my health like took a real turn in a couple of years ago, and there was a point. I'm feeling great now and I'm so grateful because like I actually think I needed to go through that crisis to feel the best I've ever felt in my entire life. And it did like show me my limitations, and that I think was a very humbling experience to realize like what I can and cannot do, and like how do I show up to the vision of my work in a sustainable way. Something I've been doing a lot, and that I actually guide a lot of our my clients that I serve, like one on one, and then the people that we work with at Wild Within, is like connecting to our 80-year-old selves. I've been really doing that practice for myself of like when I make a decision personally or business, like checking it with my 80-year-old self. It's like, is that building what I want that to be? And I think you just, at the time of this recording, you just sent an email about that I like replied to you because I was like, dude, we're on the same page. It's like, maybe if I'm lucky, I'll achieve some of the things that I'm dreaming of in my lifetime. But this is a long game. And like, how do I show up in the long game? And it's going to be different for everybody at different stages, depending on what you're offering, depending on like depending on your vision, depending on, how many people you're working with alongside with. It's like so many pieces to the question. And it's just been a well, fun now. There's been difficult times, but it's been generally a really interesting conversation with God of like, how do we make this happen in a good way? And a lot of time it's a lot slower than I think we would want it to be.
You've learned a lot on this path. You've worked through a ton. I know in as you talk about wild leadership, can you speak more to what are those principles or qualities that someone can start to think about, or maybe it'll help them be like, oh yeah, I am a leader, or
Hmm.
oh yeah, that's more accessible to me than I even thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe to just set the stage a little bit is so much of the work that we're doing, so much of the vision that we bring is, to borrow the terms, I think Bill Plotkin coined those terms, which is one of our like big influences. He said moving to an ecocentric view of the world and an ecocentric perspective rather than an egocentric one. So that's like a first and foremost question. It's like, how do I recenter the larger world around me rather than, it's like, how do I broaden my horizon? And it's helpful for me as I'm talking to you. It's like I see that I'm in on my land and there's like oaks everywhere, like just outside of my window. And the question I think that we ask all the time is like, how is nature showing leadership? Like, what is the model in the natural world for leadership? And in ecosystems, some of the like elder plants, that's literally what they're called. So like maybe in the redwood forest, you'd have like the redwoods or the elder plants, but how do they support the entire ecosystem? Because underneath, like at the roots, they're supporting, mycelium supporting them back, and then they're providing shade for all the undergrowth and the like middle-sized trees and all that. It's like in untouched ecosystems, you have like elder plants. And I think for me, and I know for me, the concept of wild leadership is really just a question of like how do we work towards elderhood, like, and the first step before elderhood is adulthood. And I think that like recently I've been reflecting on how true true like adulthood like mature initiated adulthood is wild leadership and vice versa. So really the sometimes I laugh with myself and with Alistair. I'm like, our program should have been called like Foundations of True Adulthood. I just don't know if it would have sold as well. But it's like or it's as catchy, or I don't know. But I think some of the principles, like just to make it like clear, is first and foremost, I think that wild leadership rests more on the unknown than on the known. So like the capacity to stay in the unknown is the only way that we can actually open up to true lasting change. So it's like I'm coming into a space, I'm coming into a conversation, say, I think I like using the examples of like one-on-one conversations with like friends or family members, because I think that's like that's a really easy place to start looking at how we show up as leaders or not. And it's like when these conversations, when there needs to be a hard conversation with a family member or with a friend, because I know sometimes family can be, a whole lot, and maybe not the most accessible point to talk about this. But if there's a conversation that needs to happen with a friend, like how do I show up to it? And so the principles will be for me, and this is what we teach in the course, and what we kind of bring and emphasize and bring to life in the program is like the ability to come and be in the total unknown of how the conversation actually is going to go, and being willing to sit in the, like, it's not just like, ooh, it's unknown and it's scary. It's like it's unknown, and that's the most important part, is like I have no idea what's on the other side of this conversation, but I need to remain open. And I think that leads into another big principle, which is the heart, like showing up in my heart. This is not a, like, I think sometimes the leadership feels like it's up here in the head and it's very thinky, but it's like heartfelt thinking, heartfelt leading. That's actually what's going to be way more, open up way more of a space for transformation to happen, for like healing to happen, for, whatever life wants to do, and surrendering to something greater. Like this question of like, how do we serve? I think the way we serve is by mostly listening. And it's not so much listening to the person that you're having a direct conversation with, but it's like listening to the space, listening to like the silences, listening to what spirit wants to do in this moment, and what is like trusting life in a deeper way. So there's an element of faith as well, of like, do I have faith that if I show up and I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't insert my agenda into the conversation, that somehow something even better is going to happen? Like that's I think a huge piece of, wild leadership, is like finding those places of faith. And that's, I know that can be different for everybody. We can put our faith in different things, but maybe at the simplest core, it's like faith in life, faith in like just something greater. So that's another piece, is like being able to connect to that. um and yeah, just going back to the heart, it's like that's from that place personally that I can be in true relationship to the unknown, and that I can be in true authentic like witnessing of whatever, the people in the space that I'm engaging in, that I can relate to them for real, that I can like just genuinely listen to what they're saying, if I'm listening with my heart, and if I'm speaking from my heart when I need to speak. So I mean, there's many more. Maybe the last one I'll say, because it feels like that's one of the pieces I'm bringing to the program that I feel most excited about, is like, I think that wild leadership requires us to be really clear about what our gifts are and how we can lead from our gifts. I'm not going to try to lead the way someone else is leading. The only way to be in true, authentic, wild leadership is to lead from my most fabulous self. And that's true for everyone. And it's like we all need to find, because we all have it. And I think that's where like the imposter syndrome sometimes can like creep in and be like, well, no, you don't have anything special, bro. Like, or whatever you have that's special, everyone else, like someone else already does it better than you. And it's like refining what actually makes you like a really important member of this like tapestry of life, and how do you contribute your gifts, because like at the end of the day, we don't just need one or two people to lead us. We need everybody to be able to do this in their communities, because that's the only way we're going to continue to inspire each other to, like, I don't know, grow out of the mess that we're in. Because right now it's a, I think we're all feeling it. It's not great. We need people to show up and do their work and do it from their heart. Like it's like it's dire. We need people to show up. Like, that's a cry from my heart. It's like, wake up, please, go and offer your work, go and offer your magic.
I had a longtime client recently message me saying that the reason that she works with me is so that I can help her remember who she is, so that she can help others remember who they are. And I never just heard like such an essence example of like, yeah, like that's it. Like that's it.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing in some ways. And it's like helping her highlight her gifts so that that can have an impact on other people. Um, and, as the Ram Dass says, and we're all just walking each other home in that way. Um, and so what are or how would you help someone find their gifts, and maybe maybe, or you can an example of someone who came through that you've worked with where you're like, oh, maybe they thought
Mm-hmm.
it was this, and then oh, actually they found that their gift was this. Or you could share your
Mm-hmm.
own gifts and how you came to that. You go either way with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think here's what comes up when you ask. A few years ago, I took part in a leadership course with a bunch of women, and it was really transformative. And one of the exercises that we did there, which is what I bring to the foundations of wild leadership as well, is this. It's like a little worksheet, very simple, but you fill out like the 8 memories that like stand out the most in your life, where you felt like you were in flow, you felt like you were the happiest, and you felt connected to your environment, and you felt connected to whatever you were doing, just like in flow. And so it could be like, I was journaling by myself in a cabin and when I was like 23, or it could be preparing a meal for my entire family for my parents' like 50th wedding anniversary, or like any version of that. I remember a woman being like, when I go snowmobiling in the backcountry in like Washington State or Canada. It's like, okay, cool. And you like lay all those out, and then the essence that lives within, like the thread that goes through all of these, is like your gift. And you're gonna want to like refine it. It's helpful to do it with someone. It's helpful to have like a friend that you can like tell the stories to, and then they can like track, like, okay, what is it that like consistently shows up in those memories, like what is it that's there throughout. And the advice I was given is that whatever your like truest most like epic gift is, chances are you don't even know that you're doing it. You don't even know that you have it, because it's so second nature that like you don't even think about it. And like one of the things that came up from doing that exercise a few years ago, that I actually still believe is quite true, and is going to sound a little, I don't know, maybe a little like I'm tooting my own horn or whatever, but and that's not coming from that place. But it's like, I think a lot of my medicine is just my like gigantic heart. I love with a passion, and it's sometimes a lot to be in my field of love, because I can be real honest with you. If I love you and you're about to do something that's like wrong, I can have, or like that something feels off, I'm gonna have those conversations with you. And at the same time, I can be this like mushy pile of tears, like on the regular. And I think that like that place of heart is where I find like I can bring most value to people. But then like what's cool is that you can hear that and be like, okay, that's all right. But then when you work with your gifts for like years it just deepens and deepens and deepens and deepens. And it's like the deeper you go, the deeper it gets with it.
Is this the similar to the zone of genius exercise you did at that time?
That's right. That's
I just
exactly that.
I just pulled up the email that you asked me to fill out these questions,
Oh my God, yes.
and I responded.
That was an additional one. Yeah, that was another prompt for that. That's right.
Yeah, can I share some with you?
Yeah, yeah, please.
So when you experience me at my best, the exact thing I'm doing is, and my answer to her question was, being a womb others can find safety and nourishment in. And then, what do you see a special skill I am gifted with? And I said, have the courage to see people and tell them what you see, even if it may be uncomfortable. Interesting, which is pretty much what you just said.
Yeah.
What are your three favorite qualities you see in me? And I said, expressive, bold, truth telling.
Mm.
I can go on, but I thought it was
Yeah,
funny
it's
to.
really funny actually. I forgot that was a part of the conversation. I forgot that was a part of the exercise. It was like we had this worksheet that we filled out for ourselves and then we also were asked like send out these questions to people around you. I love that you reminded me of that because that was super edgy. I remember like sending these questions and being like, oh, what are people gonna think?
It's a lot because you got to
But then
hold
it's really
like,
funny because you realize like most people reflect the same thing back to you. Like
mm,
there's a thread. There's a general thread of what you emanate, your essence, your magic. You can call it whatever.
yeah, it's a great exercise. It does, there is an edge to it for sure because it's like, are they going to project their own? Like, are they going to? You might hear some stuff you don't want to hear, or is it true or not true? Or, but yeah, would you recommend people doing that part of it or asking other people around
I
them?
would 100% recommend people do that. It was very validating. It was very validating and it was very supportive to realize that like I had people in my community that like wanted to reflect back to me because that's one of my like things that I'm working on always is like being able to reach out and ask for support and ask to be seen because I do that for people so much I forget to do it to ask it for me, and so it's an ongoing journey. So that was a great exercise. Thanks for reminding me of that. I totally
That's
forgot.
Yeah, that's fun. And I had only known you probably when you sent that email almost a year. I'd known of you for longer, but only met
Yeah,
probably just almost a year at that time. And so I could
yeah.
probably say similar things now knowing you for much longer, right? So there is that
Yeah, does that
essence.
still feel true to you? Does that when you wrote, does it still feel true?
I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, Julie-Roxane, anything else that we haven't discussed, whether it's leadership, anything that might be helpful for audience to hear, to step into, and we can talk a little bit more, obviously, about what's coming up for you. But yeah, before we do that, like anything that's on your heart and mind to share.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what's on my mind and heart, like directly just talking to your audience, which we've been doing, but like more specifically, just the heart to heart to your audience. I've been hearing a lot more stories recently of people who are like kind of in a position where I was 8 years ago, where like their lives are falling apart. They feel like they're unraveling, but they're like called to doing something different, and it requires tearing down a lot of what they've built, and it's terrifying. And I just want to be a voice in that time. If you're there, if that's where you are, or if you're, if you're a couple of years after that, or in the early stages of like feeling like you want to make some changes and you don't know where to start, just like trust the process. Just trust the process and trust that the hard parts, like the excruciating, terrifying parts, the nights where you're like alone and you don't know if what you're doing is ever going to make sense and it's ever going to work. Just trust that this is all like the alchemy process that you need to ripen to become who the world truly needs you to be. So that you can serve like this larger mission that you're here to serve. There's a quote by David White that says, like, I can't remember if it's like adulthood, but it's like, I think it's true adulthood is having the largest conversation that you could be having with the world. And I just, it is my sincerest hope that like as many people as possible start having the largest conversations that they can have with the world, because we need it.
Amen,
Mm.
sister.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Mm.
It makes me all fuzzy emotional.
Mm. Yeah, just really
Yeah.
sitting with that. Just, yeah, I hope everyone can feel the essence of that
Mm.
as I feel, as we feel. So, Julie-Roxane, what's coming up for Wild Within? I know you have another Foundations of Wild Leadership. Maybe speak to when that will start, and highly, before you even say anything about it, like if you're looking for having, some more skill around space holding or leading your life, or a call to, if something's calling you about Julie-Roxane's essence, maybe just listen to that first and foremost. But yeah, I'll let you speak about it first, because
Thank you. Thank you. And it's been really sweet to have a conversation with you. I told you I was pretty nervous before, and I'm like have felt zero. Just like, oh, we're just having a conversation like we would anyway. Yeah, so we're doing another cohort of Foundations of Wild Leadership. We're really excited to see what comes through and who kind of answers the call with that. We will begin the week of September 30th. And it's going to go until the week of November 4th. So it's going to be 6 weeks. The exact times and dates will be like decided together as a group. We found to do that last time was super supportive for people. And you can expect like weekdays and a late afternoon / evening time to accommodate for both, time, all the time zones across the US. But yeah, September 30th to November 4th, and feels like a great time to kind of dive into that, a little bit of back to school energy, a little bit of like setting ourselves up for this, school year. It matters. And yeah, it's a real honor to be offering this work. And we're going to do a weekly call. That's going to be like kind of the bulk of it, and it's going to be a little bit of teaching, a little bit of experiential. There's going to be some breakouts. Like, we want this to be like you're practicing the skills, and you're like getting in those edges of practice and like discomfort at times, and you're just like learning to tune into your own capacities as a wild leader, which again, I think that we all are here to be called to that. This is not a like, well, I'm not a leader. Plus, I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, you're definitely like intrigued by this. You're this is already something that you're considering, like the idea of, am I a leader, and how do I offer my work? Like that's it. That's being a leader. So yeah, we're gonna meet weekly, and then there's gonna be like partner groups, partner calls, shorter, that will be also weekly, just so that people can practice off the calls. We'll have like exercises, and we're trying to keep it like, again, very interactive, and not super heady. Like, there's not going to be like required readings on the side. It's very just like, come, show up, and bask in the like community aspect of it. Like you were talking about your mastermind, and I know you're also big on that. It's like what happens when you're in a group of people who like are interested in doing the same thing as you. Maybe it's not the same exact thing, but the essence of it. I feel like what I've seen happen to people who joined the first cohort was like everybody found their like way to like speed up their work in whatever way that needed to be. And it's really nice to hear actually from people where they're at now, because it's like, oh yeah, you like, not that I don't know that everybody would say it was because of Foundations of Wild Leadership. We're all doing a ton of things at the same time, but it's like it contributes to, carving out time each week for you to reflect on this aspect of your life. Otherwise, if you don't carve out that time, then it goes to the wayside. And it's like, that's why the community support really helps. So yeah, well, I'm super excited for what's going to happen there.
Julie-Roxane, who would you say it's for, right? Like, is it, I have already 100 trainings in around my belt, maybe this is not for me, or is it for them? Like, is it someone
Yeah.
that's just like, hey, I might want to like hold space for people? Like, yeah, maybe speak to who would you say? Obviously, maybe it could be for both, but curious, who would you
Yeah.
say it's for?
Yeah. I think that like I want to say my feeling is that this is relevant for everyone. Like literally every adult that's ready to kind of pick up the mantle of responsibility for co-creating a different, like for co-creating the reality that we're all living in. And it is a foundational program. So it's going to be a bit more like you're craving information about this, you're wanting to get your hands in it, but you don't really know where to start. Maybe you're starting to lead group circles in your area, maybe you're starting to work one-on-one with people, maybe you want to do these things and you just don't really know where to start, and you just want to have a place where you can like explore what that could look like. It's kind of a great place to come to refine your offerings and get like real grounded. Like we were like feeling this as like a roots program. And that I think that could be true as someone who's done many trainings. I love going back to the basics sometimes because I think that there's something I relearn, I discover new layers of the basics every time I go back to the basics. So I think that whatever whoever is feeling the call is the person for this. Is like the simple answer. Um and one of my big like heart places with this is also like I'm really big on people who are like, mothers and fathers, and like people who are like feeling called to find a new way into community and into how we relate to our family systems and communities and friendship groups and all of that. To me, that's like it can be a business thing and it does not have to be a business thing.
Love that. Yeah. So I hope if you're feeling the call that you step in. I think it's such a great, foundation. I don't think, I don't know what you're charging nowadays, but I don't think it's crazy, crazy expensive. So I think you'll find an accessible way
Yeah.
in for like a solid 6 week program, not like a 8 month thing. So not a big commitment. So if it's calling to you at all, highly
Yeah.
recommend checking it out. We'll leave a link to something in the
Yep.
show notes. Um,
Exactly.
you'll see more info there.
Yeah, there's going to be a link in the show notes to a little PDF with like all the info and how to sign up and where to direct your questions should you have them. And you can also check out more about what we're about on our website, thewildwithin.org. So yeah,
Yay. Well, thanks, Julie
thanks.
Roxanne.
Yeah,
What
this
a
was really
gift.
sweet.
Yay. All right,
Appreciate you.
friends. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye.